Feeling overwhelmed by the challenges of being a single parent? You are not alone. Welcome to Single Parent Reset. I'm Orla, a life coach for single parents, and I'm here to help you feel more calmer, grounded, and more in control of your single parent journey. If you are new to the podcast, welcome and thank you for coming along today. And if you're a regular listener, welcome back. I hope your week is going well. For me this week, I am feeling a bit rushed because I'm actually about to head off to the airport because I'm going away for the weekend, which I'm very, very much looking forward to. But before jetting off today, I had the fantastic pleasure of interviewing Sabina Challenger, who is from It's My Family. And honestly, this conversation is so good. Sabina runs It's My Family, which supports parents navigating challenging co-parenting situations and the family courts. She helps you identify and communicate any patterns of abuse that you may be experiencing, how to engage with CAFCAS in the family court, and also safe negotiate child arrangements with abusive co-parents. So trigger warning, we are going to be touching on post-separation abuse here, so please be mindful and look after yourself when listening to this episode. Okay, let's dive in because Sabina has so much to say and I cannot wait for you to hear it. Welcome to the podcast, Sabina. It is so nice to have you here today. Thank you for coming along.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm really excited.
Yes, I'm looking forward to diving into everything about you, your single parent journey, and also I think the work that you do, which is so important. And I'm sure people listening will have a lot of questions that they'll want me to be asking. And I hope I can get to all the questions that people have in their heads. So to start off, if you could tell me a bit about you and your single parent journey, and then we can talk about the work that you do.
Yes, yeah. So I think for many of us, my single parent journey has been a difficult one. So it's that transition, isn't it? It's from, the rest of my life is going to be carved out as one thing, and then sort of suddenly you're sat there alone thinking, how did I get here? What does this look like? For me though, there was sort of like an added layer that was quite difficult. So I'm of Caribbean background, and I'm sort of first generation born here, and there is a lot of sort of stereotypes around baby mothers, baby fathers, and you sort of heard those terms. And I decided that I was going to be a pioneer for, the fact that Black couples do come together, can come together, and can create the nuclear family. Yeah. And I don't know why, or I kind of took it on like it was my mission to achieve this and sort of, prove it to the world, sort of be a part of, if you like, that kind of movement. Well, that's what it became in my mind, this movement. So I waited to find the right person, and then sort of fast forward, I'm sat there with a baby, 4 months old, and all I'm thinking is, I've failed this. I've failed. I haven't achieved this. My parents are together, so I know that Black love exists. I know that this coupling is possible. And yet here I am, a single parent, feeding into all these negative stereotypes about my community, which I'm passionate about. So that was sort of one, if you like, sort of mental obstacle in my head around this transition. And then the next one was something actually that we've spoken a little bit about, and I've heard you speak about when I came to your workshop, was around, you're a single parent, and so you start to think, okay, right, I've got to reach out, I've got to connect in some way, I've got to make sense of this. So you sort of jump on Google, you start Googling, organizations, and the ones that all jump up at you are all sort of charitable based. And then I was like, I don't fit this bracket of support. I don't need help with housing. I don't need help with education. I don't need help getting a job. Okay, right, there's not really much you can do for me. And so I sat there again thinking, okay, well, where do I go with this? Where do I fit? Where's my identity with this? So funny enough, I just then Googled really randomly single parents who are highly successful or millionaires or something like that. I can't remember what I put in at the time. And this article came up, and it was an American article, and there were about perhaps 4 women who had become single mothers, and within that journey had them become millionaires through a business idea. And that for me was the seed that said, okay, there are people out there who are successful. This kind of almost narrative that
Yeah.
being a single mother equals charity case. Okay.
Mhm.
Actually, we come in all different shapes and forms. And obviously, I want to be really careful. This is not about bashing
Yeah.
anybody who requires support from charities. And we know that there are charities that have done some amazing things
Yeah.
in terms of making headway and movement
Yeah.
for single parents. But I was just in that bracket where that support wasn't available to
Yeah.
me. So I had to kind of turn my direction sort of elsewhere. But it sort of gave me a bit of a boost. And so then it started to sort of challenge a little bit this concept in my mind about what being a single parent meant. So there was another poignant moment where a few months later, well, actually, been about a year later. So I was in COVID, as many of us were. So my daughter's 6 now.
Yeah.
And I'd got to the point where sort of lockdown had been lifted. I'd gone to a friend's birthday party. So it's the first time we were starting to socialize again. Everybody there was a couple with a child.
I'm sorry, even you, as you were setting up the scene there, I was like, I know I have my own experience with this. And you're just like, oh, great, we get to see everyone, can't wait. And then you're in it and you're like, oh God, my life has completely changed. I don't look like these
Yeah.
people anymore.
Yes.
Oh. And you're like,
Yes.
I'm in it now. I think I'm going to have
Yes.
a panic attack. Sorry, I just know the
Exactly.
exact.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you've explained, and it was a really hot day. My daughter at the time was toddling,
Yeah.
so I was just walking around by her, isolated by that experience. I mean, whether you're a couple or not, that walking behind the toddler is just the most lonely experience out there.
Yeah.
And when you're with a sort of a group of people. And I remember picking her up, taking her into one of the rooms, and I just burst into tears because I was just, I don't understand where I fit. Like, even in this scenario, like, I just feel so disconnected from the people around me because I'm just not in this couple. I'm feeling paranoid. But then later that evening, it was getting to the point where some people had stayed behind. So my friend's home can accommodate quite large groups of people to stay overnight. And it was time for the kids to start going to bed. And so I remember I sort of picked up my daughter, like, right, bedtime, took her to the bedroom, did the bedtime sort of routine, laid her down and said, okay, good night, love you lot, and bye. And I walked out. And I remember every one of those couples turned and looked at me and went, is she asleep? And I went, oh, no, she's just laying down and eventually she'll fall asleep. And they were like, how did you do that? And I was like, what do you mean? And I suddenly got bombarded with all these questions, and they were then talking about, oh gosh, my one will be up, and and it's really hard and it's really difficult, and we find it tiring, and actually we dread the nighttime routine.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I realized I had a single parent superpower that perhaps couples don't have. And I sat for the duration of that evening and I watched the tag team between them all going up, no, she wants daddy, no, or she wants mummy, and backwards and forwards until eventually, obviously, the child gets exhausted and they fall asleep.
Yeah.
Now, that's not a criticism again to say that couples cannot put their children to bed.
Yeah.
But it kind of helped me realize that my situation, that there are positives because I don't have somebody to lean on, because I can't do the tag team, and because my evenings are so important so that I can get things done. I had to implement a system where we couldn't budge. There couldn't be flexibility around it. And that meant that I was able to get my daughter into a bedtime routine relatively early that enabled me that flexibility and freedom in my evenings. And it was that point that I realized, okay, there are pros and cons to being a couple, and there are pros and cons to being a single parent. And actually, we do have superpowers. And and there isn't anything wrong with parenting alone.
Mhm,
And it was kind of that, I would say that particular experience was the beginning
mhm,
of starting to shape and challenge what I would say were my shared sort of stereotypes around being a single parent. Obviously, it was then complicated further by the fact that I was unable to co-parent healthily with
mhm.
my daughter's father,
Yeah.
and that led to a lot of conflict and to some extent sort of a post-separation abuse that
Mhm.
made parenting alone really difficult. But
Yeah.
actually, it also helped to strengthen me. And like I said, and find my superpower within being a single parent.
Yeah, no, I love how you saw that switch, and even in one day. So you went from looking around, be like, and the idea of, and you're so right. There's no lonelier experience than just walking behind a toddler at a party, and because they only want you, and people are like, oh, do you want me to take them? Yeah, you can
Yep.
try, but I know they're just going to come back to me, and
Exactly.
it's to go from that to then later on actually seeing the couples and how their dynamic was. And actually, there's some positives to doing it like alone yourself. And I think that's really good that you had that kind of journey, even in one day, to help you see that glimmer of like, yeah, there's actually positives to this. And because I love talking about there's so many positives to being a single parent.
Yeah.
Um, like so many, and one of them is the like internal strength that you grow. Okay, maybe sometimes it's really annoying because there's one word that I can't stand, which is like, oh, we're so resilient as single parents, and I really
Hate
resent
it.
it because it's like, we didn't ask for this resilience. We just we do have it, yes, but it's something about it's like, oh, you're so resilient. I'm like, I kind of wish I wasn't sometimes, but okay.
Yeah.
But like there is that, like, it takes a lot now to knock, like, me personally, the things are going on, like things
Mm.
before that would have been really like had a big impact in my day, my life, I don't even bat an eyelid with, because
Yeah.
I've got other things going on. I've got more strength in me, which is great.
Mhm.
But yeah, so I love how you kind of saw that positive side of it, and then it can change your whole kind of view on single parenting. And also you touched on there as well, which I think is really important, is the idea of the dual aspect of the stereotype, because a lot of the time, obviously, it's out there in society, but sometimes we're actually confronted with our own, well, what do we actually think for a single parent? What are our own
Yep.
thoughts of it? And can we work our
Mhm.
way through that? Because I think that's really important as well, because we may be like, oh, everyone thinks that, but do you think that as well? Like, do you need to challenge your own thoughts on it?
Mhm.
And finding role models as well is so important. And I think it's great how you found those women who were like millionaires, which are
Yeah.
like, which is
Yeah.
so good. Yeah.
They were slaying. I
Yeah.
mean,
I love that. No, I think that's so, so good. And then, so that was the beginning of your kind of single parent
Mhm.
journey. And then you've touched on there your experience with post separation abuse. So do you want to talk about now the work that you're doing now and what that looks like?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's been, I would say, a journey with
Mhm,
regards to getting where I am. I've had so many different ideas that have come up for me as a result of becoming a single mother and thinking about a lot of the traumas that
mhm.
are associated with that and how they're really minimized and
Yeah.
perhaps not even understood. But I would say that the reason why I arrived at it, my family, and I guess the need for this support was sort of based on three things in my life.
Mhm,
So there was a situation that arose where I was worried about my daughter being in the care of
mhm,
her father, and we went to mediation.
mhm,
And remember, my background is in social work, so I understand how to report safeguarding. I understand the framework in which safeguarding is looked at,
mhm.
and if you like, sort of the severity of where it's weighed and how that meets criteria for intervention or not, or escalation, etc. So I felt quite confident that the information that I had was going to be understood as something quite concerning by the mediator.
Yeah.
So I'm sharing my concerns and saying, so this is why I would like to propose a particular contact arrangement that looks like this. And the mediator just sort of remained quite neutral in expression
Yeah.
and then said something along the lines of, it just sounds like there's just a lot of unnecessary people in your relationship, meaning that the people that had witnessed some of this behavior, that somehow it was like just gossip. There's just too
Right.
many people involved just gossiping. And they sort of sweep past the concerns and went directly to, so we just need to find a solution. We just need to find a solution around the contact. And I stood firm and just said, I'm not prepared to budge on this. But when I came off the call, I was devastated
Mm-hmm.
because I couldn't understand why this professional was, I wouldn't even go as far as saying minimizing, they were just sweeping. They were brushing
Yeah.
the concern to the side. And I'm thinking, this is my child. And if something happens to her, it's not you who has to live with the consequences of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happened in that moment was, again, I think because of my background and my knowledge and my experience,
Yeah.
I thought to myself, I cannot rely on a professional to validate my experience,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what I went into that meeting
Yeah.
expecting, that they would then validate it and it would be, well, of course, and then they would side with me. And I think a lot of protective parents do that.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is that I have to rely only on myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I started to document things in a certain way, capture information in a way, thinking about criteria. But then it dawned on me, how many other individuals are in this situation who
Mm-hmm.
don't have my knowledge and
Mm-hmm.
experience? How are they navigating family court, CAS recommendations, even communication backwards and forwards?
Yeah.
You know, that's the really difficult bit. You know, quite often the idea of yellow rock, grey rock, be emotionless, you know, all this stuff comes up. But
Yeah.
actually, when you've got to negotiate, it's really, really hard to remain emotionless, or you can't not respond because you've got to negotiate. Sometimes they say things that, you know, we're talking about, you know, things that trigger you and understanding what affects you. You know,
Yeah.
you know, abusive co-parents know how to push your buttons. They know what to say to bring
Yeah.
up those emotions. So I then thought, well, actually, I need, or what would be useful is a service that can actually help parents think about, what is it that you're concerned about? What is it that you're seeing and you're feeling? What is it that you're observing in terms of your child's behavior? And how can we document this in a way that you feel confident to
Mm-hmm.
be able to push forward, regardless of what any professional says to you? You can stand firm and say, no, I'm really concerned about the impact of this situation on my child. I need something to be done about this, or I need this to be looked at, or I need this to be reviewed, I need this to be investigated, whatever it is that
Yeah.
you can push back and make sure that things are followed through. I think another element that led me to It's My Family as well is that a lot of my experience is around domestic abuse, but also in perinatal mental health. So I've got almost 20 years experience as a mental health social worker. And at the moment I specialise in that particular area,
Yeah.
perinatal. So that, you know, postpartum, basically mental illness. And what was sort of frequently, I guess, coming up is when I was speaking to this particular group of women, was that when they spoke about their history, when they spoke about their past and their parenting experiences, they often described shameful, critical, manipulative parenting. What
Yeah.
we know, evidence-wise, is that those types of parenting increase the risk of anxiety disorders, depressive episodes in sort of adolescence that can then develop to more serious mental illness later on in life. So I then started to kind of pull the math together and think a little bit about, we've got these really toxic parents
Yeah.
who almost sends protective parent to their breaking point mentally. They then separate, and we then have a system that says, oh, well, they're separated from you, so the risk is no longer there. And what we'll do is we'll plonk a child and we'll get them to deal with these manipulative, controlling behaviors. We'll call whatever it is between you both parental conflict,
Mhm.
and we'll say the rights of the child trump any emotional dysregulation that you experience,
Mhm.
their right to have a relationship with that parent, which of course a child does,
Yeah.
but the child has a right to be safe. The
Mhm.
child has a right to have a safe relationship.
Yeah.
So it's the combination of those things that led me to developing It's My Family with a view to supporting protective parents to be able to identify abuse and communicate that abuse, but most importantly, advocate for
Mhm.
themselves in these situations.
Right, amazing. God, it's just so interesting, to be honest. You've said so many things. I have so many questions. Like,
Well,
where do I start? But no, what I'm thinking is actually, what does it look like? So, who's coming to you to work with you, and what does that look
mm,
like? What are the common challenges people have, and what kind of process
mm.
you take them through? I think that'll be really useful for people to hear, to
Yes,
understand what does the and why is it different to mediation? Why is it different to just going to a lawyer? Like, what's the difference there?
yes, yes.
Mhm.
So individuals are coming to me usually because they've either gone to CAFCA,
Yes.
for example, and there might be recommendations that or an outcome that suggests that there is no harm to the child. They may be coming to me because there are court orders
Yeah.
where children are being told that they need to have contact.
Can
They,
I pause for a second and can you
yeah,
explain again for anyone who doesn't know the legal jargon? So CAFCAS, what is CAFCAS? And
sorry,
court order,
yeah,
how do you even get a court order? What even is that? Let's like really
sure.
break it down. Yeah. For someone
Okay, all right.
who's really at the start thinking, okay, I don't know, like any of
Yeah,
these
what's going
terms,
on?
because
Yeah,
it's so
sure.
overwhelming as well. So yes, so
And
CAFCAS. Yeah.
there is so much information. Yes, I mean, yes, it's a very complicated system. And what I would say is that I'm not a legal expert.
Yeah.
Okay. So, there are individuals out there who would be better placed to describe that legal process.
Yeah.
But in short, if I do a really quick sort of run through,
Mhm.
you can have a parent who basically makes an application to court
Yeah.
and says, I am, I'm either unhappy with the current contact arrangement, and the other parent doesn't agree.
Yeah.
So we've gone through perhaps mediation, and
Mhm.
we need now a judge to make a decision because we cannot
Yeah.
reach an agreement. So, and a kind of an initial statement will be presented,
Mhm.
and it might be that at that point a decision can be made. But if there is abuse and there's concerns about the welfare for the child,
Yeah.
what can happen is the judge can ask for an independent body of social workers called CASCA who will do an assessment. And it's that assessment that will look at whether or not the child is at risk
Right. Okay.
from either parent,
Mhm.
and then it will be and those recommendations will be presented to the judge, and the expectation is that the judge will consider those. They don't have to follow them,
Yeah.
but the judge will consider those as part of their final decision on what that court order should look like. So what that contact should look like for the child.
Right. Okay. So someone's coming to you
Mhm.
before or after they've done that, or either.
So it can vary.
Yeah.
So I have people that are really worried that they're not going to be able to communicate their concerns. They
Yeah.
may have an upcoming
Mhm.
CASCA
Yeah.
meeting. And so they will say, I've got all of this. And often they sort of literally vomit
Mhm.
so much because obviously their own emotions are caught up. And what I then do is I then say, okay, let's flip this around. Let's do this from the position of the child. I know this sounds really, really awful, but let's remove you and the impacts on you for the moment. That's all really relevant. And this space is here for you to be able to share all of your frustrations and your worries. But actually, what we're going to do is we're going to pin it down to the child. And then what I support them to do is really think about okay, when this particular thing happened,
Yeah.
how did that impact the child? So what parents might, it's probably more helpful if I give an example.
Yeah.
So it might be that the other parent has agreed to pick up the child from school. And at the last minute, they say they can't do it. And the child is left there waiting for, let's say, 45 minutes. And so the other parent the protected parents get a phone call from the school and they're saying, oh, well, just nobody turned up. They may only just notice that they've got this message that it's cancelled. So they were going to do an extra shift at work. They have to then leave work early, or maybe they can't get out of work. They have to call a family member.
Yeah.
The family member's then irritated because they've got to drop what they're doing to quickly run and get the child. The family member might be saying, well, why did you put your trust in them anyway? You know what they're like. So what happens is that all of this, of course, comes up. So this is all what the protective parent is sharing. And it's, and it's unreasonable, and they constantly do this, and it's not fair. Not at any point, as much as all of that is relevant, all of that is really, it's irresponsible, it's not fair on the protective parent. Not at any point in that description have I explained the impact on the child.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what you want to do is flip that a little bit and actually focus on, when I turned up, the child was worried, the child looked scared, they seemed unsettled. They perhaps, I don't know, they didn't eat their dinner that evening, or, or I had to sleep with them because they were unsettled. Or so it's talking about what was the child's presentation, and then what did you have to do in order to settle them, and how distressed were they as a result of that. And it's constantly flipping it about how did that impact the child. And then it's logging all of those incidents in that way. Because then over time, what you then see is a picture of a child where actually even the parents sit back and say, my goodness, this is crazy. This is what they're going through. You're seeing that emotional dysregulation. You're seeing the stress that this child's nervous system is just constantly going up and down because the protective parent is inconsistent, or because the protective parent is causing arguments in front of them, or whatever that is. But once you can really focus on what the child experiencing and documenting that, you can really see the pattern. So the parents come to me at different stages, whether there is a pending court case, whether it's a pending CAS-CAS assessment, whether it's after CAS-CAS and they feel that the safeguarding concerns haven't been considered, whether they're about to write a witness statement and they want to make sure that the information regarding the safeguarding concerns are accurately documented so it's taken seriously. So it's at varying points that they'll come to me for support.
Right. Okay. It's so interesting about the idea of it being, and you played out so well there, the idea of that example of like the child's or the other parent not picking up the child from school. Like you do go straight to like, and then I had to leave at work early, and then I'm getting, hassle from my boss, and then I was all, and naturally all these, and also if you're relying on another family member, then they're irate at you and it grows arms and legs. And that's where you kind of come with all that annoyance, obviously. But like you said, you need to take yourself out of it. All of that matters, of course, and take it, and that needs to be dealt with. But it's like when it comes to like the law and the legalities of things, it's the impact on the child. I think that's so useful, because I know, even for people going through like divorce and things like that, it's this idea of like, but they cheated on me and they're having a kid with the person they cheated on me with, and how dare they get all these things. The court does not care that they cheated on you or anything like that. The court is seeing, unless there is abuse and things like that, of course, separate conversation there, but really it is, they don't care about who did what or when and how, kind of thing. And it's but then it's having. And that's where it's so hard, because emotions are so high in these situations. And it's being able to, which is what you do, help people to, is being able to work through your emotions or work through what's going on for you and focus on the child and get the outcome that you want, and to get to that outcome. It's just fascinating. What are like the biggest, I guess, challenges that people come to you with when they're coming to you and they feel like they're just at their wits' end? Like, what are really common things that people come to you with?
Main things are what I described. So it's I'm just not believed. I'm not believed. And I don't know how to get the system to take my concern seriously. So
Mhm.
I would say that's the first one: real anxiety, real fear around their child, being in this particular situation, um, and just not knowing how to protect them, not knowing, like I said, how to communicate the
Yeah.
actual impact of this parenting style on the child. Um, the other one is negotiation.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, when they come to me, they their nervous system is it's up here,
Yeah.
they are in fight or flight. Anytime their phone pings, anytime an email sent, they're just on edge because the communication is always so toxic. And a lot of the help or the support, sorry, that I provide is around reducing a lot of the backwards and forwards. And the way that I do that is to help them think about what they need to respond to
Mhm.
and what they can leave.
Mhm.
And when I can kind of, I guess, get them in a rhythm of communicating and
Yeah.
negotiating in a certain way, sorry, that tends to reduce a lot of the
Yeah.
anxiety.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I think, yeah, sometimes even getting to that point of where, especially at the beginning or when tensions are really high, of
Mm,
just stopping and asking your question, does this require a response? Like sometimes, or does it require a response right now as well? Like it's a really
yeah.
useful one. So helping with communication, that's a really good one. And then I'm wondering then for someone who wants to start documenting safeguarding concerns, what
Mhm.
should they be documenting? How should they be documenting? Like where do you even start doing this?
Yeah. Yeah. So what I ask the people to do who I work with is to think about 4 areas.
Yeah.
So it's is the unprotective parent being accountable? Are they being reasonable? Are they being responsible? And are they being flexible? And so, whenever there is a dynamic that comes up, to think about documenting under those headings and then directing that to the child. So, are they being responsible to the child?
Yeah.
Are they being flexible? So, flexible could be, for example, in their thinking. If a child has a birthday party on their particular weekend with their best friends and they are just saying, well, no, it's my weekend. I don't see why I should have to give up. Is that showing flexibility for the child? Is that being, is that considering the child? No, it's not. So you might want to document that under flexibility
Yeah.
and using a date, like I said, using one of those 4 headings, providing a brief description. So just like I did, and then the child was really upset because they couldn't go to the birthday party. What was the level of distress? So there's an emotional response scale that I use. So you'd use a number and then a brief description about what did that child's distress look like. So they were crying, it prolonged, it went on for about half an hour, and that way you've got this really nice
Yeah.
snapshot. Yeah. And you can tie it again to help with the thinking. So again, like you said, rather than it being about, and I was running around and
Yeah.
this was annoying and I was fed up and the child was crying and I was exhausted. And
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
actually it's just how do those areas relate to the child. I also support them to think about it under the 2 safeguarding categories
Right.
that are guided from a
Mhm.
child safeguarding. Yeah. So in terms of policy, the idea is that there is a framework around what neglect looks like and what emotional abuse looks like. So if you can also hold those 2 descriptions, if you like, sort of the guidance in mind, then that helps you as well to think about what does this fall under? Because sometimes as well, we might say something, some parents will say, I give my child a nightlight at night when they're here because they get scared of the dark. But when they go to the protective parent, well, they don't give them a nightlight and they feel really scared. Okay, well, when we think about the category of neglect or we think about the
Mhm.
category of emotional abuse, does it meet the threshold? Is it something that meets? Okay, it helps still document it because it helps to perhaps create an overall picture about that person's ability to be flexible. But again, is that something that you're going to lead with to share as evidence in a court? Probably not, because it's not going to meet those two thresholds. So it's also just helping parents to file, to create, if you like, what's the word that I'm looking for? Sort of almost like a hierarchy, yeah,
Yeah.
from more severe to mild.
Yeah, and I really like this idea of just writing the things that almost bother you down through this lens, because some of the stuff that, because I'm thinking when you say flexibility, my version of flexibility and another person's version of flexibility are going to be completely different. So it's once you start writing it down, maybe you'll start to see, oh, hang on, if I was to put myself in another person's shoes, would they see this as inflexible? And it just can start you thinking from different perspectives and help you navigate through it. And also through writing the lists, you might realize some things are actually major things and other things, they don't really matter. And it can help you start to let go of the things that don't matter and really just focus on the things that do.
Yeah.
Easier said than done, though. And I guess I wonder, for what advice would you have for someone who's just writing this list, finding it absolutely exhausting and overwhelming and like just depressing, even having to write this? Like, what? And I know it's for the child and you're doing it all for the child so you can get what you want, but this is hard stuff that you're writing about. So what advice would you have for someone who's really struggling with just the fact of even this place, having to sit down and write these awful things down?
Yeah. What I say to everybody, and I must admit, this is the part of what I do, which I do find quite sad, is that we cannot predict what the outcome is going to be of a court case. We cannot predict the decision that a judge or a magistrate will make. And so, what I always say to everybody, and I hold this for myself as well, is that I need comfort in knowing that I'm doing everything that I can to safeguard my child. And I also want my child to know that I'm doing everything that I can to safeguard you. Because I think what we as parents sometimes, I wouldn't say forget, but maybe struggle to hold on to, is that our children grow up. They're not always going to be these little people that are really vulnerable, that can't make decisions for themselves. So the courts, for example, I can never quite remember the age, but I think it's from about sort of 12 or 13. The court say something along the lines of, we can't force children to abide by court orders because they have legs, meaning they'll just run away if you try and enforce them, if you try and ask them to be somewhere they don't want to be. So what it's really about is creating spaces, neutral, independent spaces for your children until they can get to that age where they can start to decide where they want to be, creating those spaces so that they can be contained, so that if there's anything really concerning that comes up, it can be captured. So some of the things that I might advocate for, and obviously it depends on someone's financial sort of flexibility, freedom, is getting the child some sort of therapy. So play therapy doesn't need to be sort of intense every week, because, they haven't got like sort of mental difficulties, I say, or, sort of emotional challenges necessarily, but someone that can provide that neutral space. Because children very quickly, they know that we're in conflict. They're not silly. They know we don't talk or that we don't like each other, and they're treading on eggshells in the protective parent's environment just as much as they are in the abusive. They don't want to upset the protective one. They don't want to dysregulate the abusive one because of the consequence. So they're constantly juggling. To provide this neutral space for them, over time, they may feel comfortable to express and talk about what's really happening for them. So that's one thing that I will sometimes advise. There are also other services. So there are CAMs, although they do deal with more of the severe end. There are waiting lists.
Yes.
But that is an option. Another options are schools. So they sometimes have well-being sort of officers. There might be opportunities for children to be able to have specific teachers who might be trained in certain things, who can provide a space. If you open up and say, look, this is really difficult, this is what we're going through, I don't know what their experience is, perhaps a neutral space. Is that possible? So I think providing that space for that child is one thing, but also, like I said, holding on to the fact that they do get older, they do see who's doing what, they do see who's safe, who's batting for them, who's on their side. And eventually, once they get to an age where they can have more power in their decision making, everything that you are doing, pouring in to safeguard them, they will know that, they will understand that, and
Yeah.
they'll know that you've done the best that you could to
Hmm.
protect them.
Yeah. Oh, there's some really good tips there and places that for people where they can go for their child and what they can do for their child, which I know we're all child focused, but I'm thinking,
Yeah.
and even from your own personal experience, what
Mm.
about you? What about you in all of this? Because we're talking high conflict situations
Yeah.
and like life's been turned upside down and this can go on for years for people. Like, how do you look after yourself through this process?
So one of the things that I do, so I sort of have these kind of communication pillars, like there's 5 areas that I focus on. And the first 2 areas are about your sort of emotional resilience.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And also just having an awareness of what emotionally sort of triggers you. Yeah. And so as part of these sessions, incorporated into all of this that I do, I am constantly thinking about the well-being of the protective parent and what we need to do to safeguard. So just going back earlier a little bit to your question around sort of communication and what specifically do I do? So I start from, I guess, the basis that communication really is what is going to support you and give you strength in this whole journey. So it's really important that you think about how you communicate to yourself. We've kind of spoken about that, and what you're telling yourself about this experience, what you then communicate to others, so i.e., the unprotective parent, what they communicate back to you, and how you digest that and internalize that. Because actually, nobody can trigger you if you're standing firm and grounded in your belief. So I will do a lot of work about thinking about what is your belief about being a single parent? What is your belief about parenting, your parenting style, being a mother, being a father, what all of that looks like? Because sometimes a lot of the distress comes from as well. I have a particular way of parenting and the other person parents differently, and that feels really uncomfortable. So it's about picking that apart. How much of this is based on values and beliefs, and how much of those can we shift and perhaps challenge a bit? Some of them we can't because it does move into safeguarding, but how many of those can we be a bit more flexible around? And I think when we're doing a lot of that type of work, that actually you just see the anxiety start to come down because you start to challenge certain like core beliefs about, like I said, what it means to be a parent or what it means for to even be a mother or a father, because even being a parent differs even in terms of gender roles and what those
Yeah.
expectations are. So I will provide a sort of a lot of emotional support and guidance around thinking about that, but also grounding techniques and thinking about what do we need to do to regulate the nervous system. So there's a little bit of sort of CBT that gets thrown in there, compassion focus therapy that I use, skills as well, just to think about where are we driving from? So are we going from a fight or flight response and that's leading us to drive and fight and keep going, and then you're experiencing that burnout? How about can we push into the soothing system and think about how you access your drive? So your drive system is like your motivation to get up, go, get things done. Can we think about how we can use your soothing system a bit? Nice things to also push you to drive rather than you constantly being triggered from this kind of very sort of, nervous system, high cortisol, adrenaline type response, which, like you said, can have a massive impact on you as a parent over time.
Yeah. I even you talking through this there made me feel calm. It's just like I can hear you talk about it. It's just so calming because it is this whole thing of Oh, I can just feel so noisy, and a
Mhm.
lot of it can, especially when you're co-parenting as well, some of the conflict can come down to your version of parenting versus their version of parenting, and the acceptance of you are now in a position where you're parenting across two households, and being able to learn what you can and can't control is, again,
Definitely.
not talking about safeguarding issues, but just
No.
in general, it's
Mm.
and really coming to terms with, instead of spending all of your energy trying to change the parent that they are, actually
Mhm.
just accepting that that's the situation. How can we make it work for me? I think is so
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
And then one question that I do have is, so let's say you've done all the work and you're going through the
Mhm.
process and you're coming from a really grounded, not as triggered place, and things are
Mhm.
processing along and you're fine, well, as fine as you can be in
Yeah.
it. But
Mhm.
then you go and you meet up with friends and family, and
Mhm.
they start throwing in their opinions or their judgments of it. What advice would you have for someone who struggles to stay grounded in that situation where they've done all the work and they're like, I'm so clear. And then they go out for dinner and they're like, oh, well, okay, now I don't know. Like, oh, maybe I shouldn't
Yeah,
be
yeah,
doing
yeah.
this. Yeah.
So again, so thinking about the 5 pillars of communication,
Yeah.
those are my last 2. So it's about learning self-validation, and that's the bit where I was saying about being informed, having the information, understanding what is it that I'm seeing in my child that dysregulates that child? What is it that I'm worried about from a safeguarding perspective? And how do I communicate that? Now, the reality is that when we're talking about sort of a coercive control
Yeah.
type picture, we all know that individual events can always be explained away.
Yeah.
That's the first thing that you have to embed in your head. I can say to you, again, using the analogy about the school pickup, you can explain that to me. Oh, I'm really, he keeps doing this and whatever. And I can say, but, he's got a really difficult job. He's working 70 hours a week, or
Hmm.
she's working 70 hours a week. I mean, they're trying. I know they do it a lot, but they're trying. That's the invalidation, isn't it? You walk away because actually what we have as parents is we have a wider context. We
Yeah.
have an understanding of a personality of somebody. So this isn't just about that incident
Hmm.
or that particular thing that happened. This is about that incident in the context of, how does this individual make you feel? How does this individual invalidate you? How does this individual strip you of your confidence? How does this individual isolate you from others? How does this individual control your money? How does this, and then you're understanding it in that context. You're not understanding it in the context of yes, if you're a very healthy co-parent, yes, of course, there are going to be times where
Yeah.
you get late, things just go wrong. But the way you're going to communicate about that, and the way that you're probably going to be apologetic, probably quite flustered yourself, you're going to communicate in a way that indicates to the other co-parent that actually, I didn't want this to happen and I'm really sorry and I'm going to try and make sure it doesn't happen again. When you've
Yeah.
got an abusive co-parent, the communication is going to be different. It's going to be, well, this is your fault. You should just understand. Or,
Hmm.
well, it's not my fault you didn't answer the phone on time. Or there's going to be a difference
Yeah.
of the communication. There is always leaning into the evidence that you've got about it.
Yeah.
I think it's also important to think carefully about which groups of people you talk to.
Yeah.
And that can be really quite hard at the beginning, because when you're hurting, one of the things that when we think about compassion, compassion focuses on who you give compassion to, who you essentially, like, you receive it from. So there's this kind of exchange of compassion. What sometimes you'll do is, like, you'll say, okay, Sabina, you're a single parent and I'm a single parent. So of course you're going to naturally have compassion about my situation. But what can also happen is that when we experience something traumatic and then we move through it, sometimes there's a shifting in our mind that can
Yeah.
happen. So I know from my personal experience, I went to a family member who was a single parent, much older. So thought I'd get all this compassion. And I was met with a very much, oh, well, you'll just get through it. It will be okay. And I was like, what? Hang on a second. Uh, all right. So am I then overreacting? Is it really not that hard then as a single parent? Because you're sort of
Yeah.
just, but then I realized thinking about it from the compassion focused therapy approach is that actually I went to the wrong person for that compassion. I'm still validated. It feels hard. I can feel it. What am I feeling in here? Well, it doesn't feel very nice. So I'm not going to tell myself that I'm overreacting because it's real. My feeling is real. It's here. If I tell myself I'm not feeling what I'm feeling, then I'm going to experience an incongruence in my mind, in my brain. And that starts to get dangerous in terms of my mental health. So I'm feeling it. So I'm going to sit with it. Who else can I talk to? Who else? My mum doesn't understand. My dad doesn't understand. My brother doesn't understand. Oh, my aunt does, or my cousin does. They're the people that I need to talk to for support.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, because sometimes, and that's where the isolation can come in sometimes, because you're like, like no one is getting this. And also a great thing is reaching out to other single parents, other people who've been through similar situations. And there's loads of groups out there. You can find them on Facebook and different places, of other people talking about. You will think you're the only one who's got this situation. And I can guarantee you, you are not. There are many others who have got the same situation. Great. Oh my God. Like, so many questions, and but I'm like, I need to stop it because we're going to run over. But I do want to ask you, it's my favorite question that I love asking at the end of all my questions with guests, is what, Sabina, is your favorite thing about being a single parent?
My favorite thing about being a single parent is that I don't have to discuss my decisions with anyone. I'm gonna be honest, I love it. I mean, going back to the kind of the scenario that I spoke about when I was with all the couples, and there was also other things that I observed, which was this ping pong of, well, should we do this? Well, what do you think? Well, how do you think that? Well, do you? And I just thought, oh, I don't have to do that.
I know.
I can just make a decision, and we can do it. What do you want for dinner today? Do you want to just go to the park? Should we just go here on holiday? Should we just, it's great. It's lovely.
It is, honestly, it's one of the best things. You just get to like do, yeah. And this, no, I'm going to say it. When one of my favorite things is, and this is awful, when I travel through the airport and I'm with my son, and he's now, what age is he? He's 7 now. But even I've done a lot, because I live in London, from Dublin. So I've done loads of airporting with him when he was younger, with the buggy and everything. And yeah, it was hard because I had to carry everything. And for some reason, in airports, people just do not help you. I don't know what it is. Like, honestly, I live in London and people are help me all day long on the tube and everything. Get into an airport and it's every man for themselves. I don't know what it is. But what I do, anyway, whatever. Do you know what? I'm allowed to say it. When I see couples and they have young kids and you can just tell they're only even at like security and they're ready to kill each other, I'm like, do you know what? I'm going to enjoy my holiday, just me and my son, like, because I don't need to deal with that dynamic. Yeah, it's a little bit.
Yeah, and it's not a criticism.
No.
Coupling, but I think what it is it's just bringing to light that there are pros and cons. To be a single parent, but equally to being, a coupling, and I think that we don't talk enough about actually the really great things that being a single parent, things that we can enjoy, we can do. So it's not a criticism. No. I just want to make that really clear to the listeners. Yes, we don't want any angry couples.
We love all the couples. You're doing a great job, and as are we. Well, Sabina, this has been so, so good, and I hope it's been really useful for the listeners as well, and especially the ones who maybe have been sitting silently thinking, I don't know where to move forward with this. Now they have some idea. So for anyone who just want to know more about you and the work that you're doing, where can they find you?
So they can find me on TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, and my website is www.itsmyfamily- let me start again. My website is www.it-myfamily.com. Got there.
Amazing. And then if someone's working with you, just quickly, what does it look like? Is it one-to-one sessions? Like, do you have one-off sessions, or do you work with you for a certain amount of time?
So one-to-one sessions, and they can work with me for as little or as as long as they need. So I would say what most people do is have like an initial consultation, which is like a deep dive session.
Yeah.
We look at everything. We then work out them sending me documentation or things to review. And then we book another session and start to work through thinking about how we record. And then depending on their level of confidence,
Yeah.
they will either record, come back and say, can we look through this together? Or actually they'll say, right, I've got this and I'll run with it. So
Yeah.
it really does depend what people.
Brilliant. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's been lovely. Thank you.
Now, how good was Sabina? Honestly, I feel like this topic, it is so emotive and it can feel so overwhelming, but I feel like she really broke it down and helped guide people through it who might be struggling. So if this is you and you are struggling with it and you want to know more about Sabina, please do go check out her website. I'm going to put her website details in the show notes. And thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. I really appreciate you coming along and giving yourself this time for you to just listen. If you want to know more about the work that I do, which is one-to-one coaching for single parents and also going to workplaces and helping them be inclusive for single parents, go to my website. It's solacecoaching.com. My last request is if you could do one favour for me, it would be share this with one other single parent who may need to hear it. Until next week, look after yourselves and speak to you then.